used to enjoy the half-an-hour ride, having lots of laughs and listening to the latest gossip. Now, one morning, I looked around the still quite empty bus and I noticed a fellow female pupil standing near her friends who were already seated. Right behind her, touching her with his body, stood this guy I had never seen before. I thought, that must be her older boyfriend. I didn't know she had one. He looked kind of scruffy and unhygienic. I was bored, so I watched the group for a while and I noticed that the guy wasn't actually speaking to her or her friends. In fact, he looked kind of unfriendly and detached. I also noticed that the girls all had really awkward and uncomfortable facial expressions, and the girl he was pushed up against was kind of getting upset. Now, she chose to sit down in the row in front of her friends, probably scared that he would sit too, but he didn't. He looked really pissed, walked over to another girl and rubbed up against her. Keep in mind, the bus was still quite empty at that point, so absolutely no excuse to huddle up that tight against a strange kid. He would now get on the bus every single morning and stand right by a random young schoolgirl for at least 20 minutes. Once he rubbed right up against my friend's shoulder, who was sitting next to me on the outside seat, and let me tell you, it's super weird having this guy being creepy to your friend but trying to act like nothing's wrong. We were too scared to say anything to him, and he probably wouldn't have cared anyway because it was literally only children on this bus. He looked completely confident while we were obviously whispering about him. Some girls actually cried when he got on the bus in the mornings. The guy liked to look around in the bus, and one morning he noticed me talking about him. He looked me dead in the eyes with a very unsettling facial expression and casually lifted his sweater for a few seconds, revealing the handle of a gun. Right, so that is absolutely terrifying. I actually spoke to this Redditor who posted this, and I asked whether it was just like a school bus, like specifically to bring children to and from school. But it wasn't, because I was kind of confused if it was an actual school bus, like what is that guy doing on there, right? But apparently it's just like a normal public bus, but it is usually at that time filled with children. And this person just randomly showed up one day harassing kids on this bus and then kept doing it every single day from that point on. Like, this is wild. I will never understand what goes through your mind if you do stuff like that, especially to children. Like, this is physically making me nauseous. I mean, Also, bring a gun if your intention is to be inappropriate with children. I mean, that's beyond me. This is just a dangerous, disgusting psycho, really. There's no other description for this person. Now, apparently, the driver of this bus didn't notice because the bus was always full of children and, as you can imagine, quite loud. And apparently, the driver just always got pissed about the noise and just kept to himself because of it. But honestly, I mean, you kind of have to keep an eye on what's happening in your bus, right? I mean, isn't that kind of the whole point? Honestly, they should have 2 people working on a bus, one that drives it and one that keeps an eye on the passengers, because some of the stuff that happens on public transport is just wild. It's wild. And I have experience with that. I mean, I hope, for the kids' sake, that this is not actually happening anymore. I hope that somebody alerted the authorities about this, because this is just problematic and disturbing behaviour, right? Anyways. Alright, so the next story involves a dog being an absolute hero, so you've got that to look forward to. This story was originally posted by a Reddit user called evening_soft_3576. Their story is called "Did This Dog Protect Me from Possible Danger?" So about a year and a half ago, I was 16. I had taken on a job of babysitting my aunt's dog in the Bronx while she was away on business. I don't exactly know the breed, but this dog was a powerhouse, more than capable of taking someone down. Her name is Dolly. I had to introduce myself to her in my aunt's presence to ensure she knew who I was before showing up alone later. I was told to walk her about 4 times a day. Now, she's very well trained. She doesn't bark really, which is what makes this encounter even more creepy. It was late, like 2 a.m. kind of late, and she adorably woke me up for a walk by digging her nose into my arm. When we began our walk, it was really dark out. You wouldn't be able to see anyone's face from a few feet away. The streets were empty, but that's to be expected at 2 a.m. Now, in this suburban kind of area in the Bronx, the sidewalks are very narrow. You can't walk indoors. Dolly was slow because she liked to smell literally every molecule on the sidewalk. I'm laughing because this is so relatable. My dog does that as well. Now, here's the creepy encounter. There was a man who was walking down the same sidewalk as us, maybe about 10 feet behind us. Dolly went off of the sidewalk to where the grass was to sniff at a tree. I knew with her that could take years to be done with, so I kinda signaled the man, who was a lot closer now, to go on, and I stepped enjoyable sight. Then, all of a sudden, Dolly begins barking ferociously at something behind me. Now, it startled the hell out of me because it was so abrupt and I hadn't ever seen her bark like that. I quickly turned around to see what would make her do this, and there was the same man from earlier. He hadn't gone any more forward in the direction he was going in since I signalled him to pass me. He was still standing there, about 5 feet away. He wasn't on his phone. He was standing there just looking at me. Dolly was going crazy at him, and he had little to no reaction to her barking. I got a closer look at him. He was tall, very tall, like taller than me, and I'm 6'3". He was bald, and his face was expressionless, although half of it was covered in the darkness of the night. I realized that this guy must have just stood there staring at me for 10-15 minutes. He definitely wasn't trying to talk to me in that time, because my music wasn't that loud. I would have heard him, and I don't think he was admiring my dog, because even with her barking, his eyes were zoned in on me. We had about a 10-second moment of staring at each other. Normally, I would have just asked him if he needed something, but I just had the worst feeling ever. He right away reminded me of the dancing tall smiley man creepypasta story, which I think was the cause for my fear at that moment. I turned away from him and felt safe with this ginormous dog. I took my AirPods out of my ears so I could hear if he followed me. Dolly walked with me, but her eyes stayed on him the entire time. Instead of continuing down the same street, I crossed the block. As I started to do this, I kid you not, this man absolutely sprinted in the opposite direction he was originally heading in. The sound of his feet rapidly hitting the floor sent shivers to my spine. I quickly turned around and watched him do this. He ran as if his life depended on it. I watched him run till he turned the corner and was out of view. I held Dolly's leash tight and hurried back to the house. I don't think he followed, but Dolly kept looking back and growling. When we got back, I locked the door and made sure Dolly slept in the bed with me. I really love how dogs just seem to have this sixth sense for judging people's character. I mean, it's like a dog knows when a creep starts to walk up, or when somebody has bad intentions, when somebody is not a good person. It's like these dogs know. They start growling, they start barking, they alert their owners. Like, it is wild. I love dogs. I really do. We really don't deserve them. But secondly, I mean, when you go out on your own, even if you have a dog with you, and especially so late at night, you really gotta keep your head on a swivel. I mean, at any point, at any moment, you could be confronted with a dangerous situation and you need to be on high alert. So, I don't think this Redditor is gonna be taking walks at 2 a.m. in the morning with AirPods in because the Redditor realised that he was there and because of the dog's reaction. That's what I'm assuming, at least. At any rate, I am really, really glad this Redditor and Dolly stayed safe. Alright, so the next story is a very short one, but it's super creepy and weird and interesting. So, this story was originally posted by a Reddit user called Pyroclasmic88. Their story is called The Bucket Man, or Who is Outside My Apartment at 5 a.m. I, 33 female, live with my boyfriend, 42 male, in a small fourplex in a very small town. Now, I work at 6 a.m. and wake up at 4:30. Ouch, that is painful, that must sting. About 2 weeks ago, during my morning routine, I noticed someone standing behind a dumpster 20 feet away. I know my apartment is the only one with lights on, and he's looking at my window, just watching for about 5 minutes, when I notice the man had a dog. Now, I just wrote it off and didn't pay mind to this at all, until today, that is. This morning, I left for work, as usual, stepped out the front door and scanned the area. All clear. I walk the 10 feet to my car, buckle up, and start my music. I back out of my spot, and when I shift to drive, I suddenly see a man with a bucket on his head, standing at the end of the walkway within 3 feet of my car. We made eye contact, and he pulled the bucket off of his head and stepped towards me. Of course, I panicked and floored it because he got closer to me. I'm honestly scared. I even told my boss that if I didn't show up or call, that I was in trouble. I feel so scared. I'm gonna be carrying a can of wasp spray to my car every morning, at least until the pepper spray I ordered arrives. Police and landlord have been contacted, as well as the neighbours. Honestly, it would be scary enough if you had to get up at 4:30 in the morning and leave at like 5:30 or whatever, and you get to your drive and there's somebody stood there. That's already creepy enough. Then add the bucket on the head into the mix, and it's just wild. It's just incredibly wild. Like, what is he thinking? Like, what is he trying to achieve? I'm just beyond baffled by all this. Like, sure, there's some really freaky people and really creepy people about, but a bucket on their head, like, I am so confused. I am so confused. I know one thing, if somebody was stood in my driveway with a bucket on their head in the middle of the night, because let's be honest, 5 in the morning, that's the middle of the night, I would be legging it as well. I would definitely be legging it. Alright, time for the last story for tonight. Now, this story, I can't tell you the Reddit username because they deleted their account, but the story is called "My Sons and I Encountered Something While Camping, and I Still Can't Explain It." For context, I'm 30. My sons are 11 and 9. They live with their mother on weekdays and I get them on weekends and any school holidays. When I get them on school breaks, we love to go out and spend some time in the wilderness. I love wild camping and it's great for some bonding time. Now, this happened last summer. They had pretty recently finished school for the year, so this was late July. We decided that we were going to go on an extended camping trip, a fortnight out in the wild. I knew a great place in Scotland where we could go. I had gone there with some mates not too long ago. There was a lake with clean water and shelter not too far away if the weather turned sour. We started planning our trip. My boys were very excited to be going on such a long outing. Our longest previous trip was only 5 days, so 14 days was going to be a whole new game. So we had gathered supplies and made our way to our new home for the next fortnight. Everything started out great. The weather was hot, and as soon as we arrived, all 3 of us stripped down and went skinny dipping in the lake. I know, but it was this kind of weird beginning of trip ritual that we had. Though it did feel great after being sat in a hot car for over 5 hours. The first few days were amazing. We were having a brilliant time, but at day 4 or 5, that was when things started getting strange. It began quite simple. We had gone swimming in the lake, and when we went back, all our clothes and sleeping bags and blankets were gone. So I walked closer to the village to try and get some reception on that little flip phone that I brought to see if one of my mates who lived not too far away would be able to bring us some. Now, as I was walking, that's when I saw that our sleeping bags were hanging from a tree. They had been tied with ropes around the hoods as if they had been hanged with a noose. Suffice to say, this really scared me, but I assumed it was some prank done by stupid teenagers that had stumbled upon our camp. I untied them and went back to the camp. person was saying, but the sound just sent daggers down my spine. I tried to listen carefully to make out what it said, but it was no good. I got every third word at best, and it just wasn't making any sense. It gradually sounded as if it was getting closer, and I was just frozen in fear. It couldn't have been longer than 10 seconds, but it felt as if it were an eternity. Then it went quiet. There was no sound. I waited another 10 seconds or so, trying to gather the courage to get out of my tent. I did. I waved my torch around and I saw nothing. After that, I climbed into my son's tent and slept with them for the night. Again, I stupidly tried to find a logical explanation. It was a bad dream, I thought. I must have been half awake and I just imagined what I heard. There's no reason to go home just because I'm feeling a little spooked, right? By this point, the food that we had brought was running dangerously low, so we decided that we would catch fish for our supper that evening. It was fun and I love freshly caught fish. We spent all day fishing, and by 5 p.m.-ish, we went back with more than enough to fill our bellies, and I started to prepare them for dinner. I gutted one, then 2, until all but 1 fish remained. I sliced the last fish open when all of a sudden 30, maybe more, live maggots splat on my worktop. I've never seen anything like that before. The fish were newly caught, maybe an hour or 2 before at most. It was disgusting, and I should have taken it as yet another sign of what was to come. We ended up not eating the fish. I hate that we wasted them, but I just couldn't bring myself to look at them again after those maggots came out of one. I heated up some tin soup. We ate, and then we went to bed once more. Again, I stayed up later than I should have, though maybe, looking back, that was for the best. Once more, at 1, maybe 2 a.m., I heard the voice, low and raspy, though this time I also heard a second voice. It was clear that they were speaking English, or at least some of the words were English. Again, I could only understand every 4th word or so, and what they were saying did not make any sense. Once again, the voices grew louder. They sounded like they were getting closer. I would have sworn they were maybe a meter or 2 away from the tents. When the voices didn't stop, I prepared myself mentally to protect my boys. I got up slowly and I moved to the entrance of my tent. I stepped out with my fists out in a mock fighting pose. I would have no clue what to do in a real fight, but that doesn't mean I wasn't going to defend my kids. I waved my torch around, frantically searching for the origin of the noise, and that's when I saw them. 2 figures who were long and thin and pale were stood at the edge of the forest, maybe 10 meters away from where I was stood. They looked up at me with a twisted expression on their faces. They smiled at me, and then they slowly backed into the forest. The second they were out Personally, I find camping stories always extra creepy. It's because you're already in kind of like a creepy setting. There's no street lights, you're in nature, there's nobody there to protect you. It's just, the perfect setting for terrifying things to happen, don't you think? I do wonder who those men were who were stood there at the edge of the forest and what they wanted. It's so weird that for 2 days on the bounce this Redditor could hear voices, and not just any kind of voice, like low, raspy, creepy voices. It's just wild to me. I'm already not keen on camping, but this is putting me off even more. I'm glad this Redditor and his kids stayed safe though, and I'm glad they left. Also, what was the deal with that fish? Like, what? Like, all the other fish were fresh, and then there was one fish that contained maggots. So what, did they put like a rotten fish in with their freshly caught ones? Like, how did they do that? That is so strange. Because I can't imagine a living fish swimming around with maggots in their belly. Like, that is proper decay. Like, that is the fish rotting. So I am completely baffled by that one. I don't know what happened there. To be honest, if I saw my sleeping bag being hung up like over a tree branch by the hood like a noose, I would have already probably noped the hell out of there, because I'm really not keen on camping anyway. So if like really creepy stuff is also gonna happen, no. Not me, no thank you. No thank you. Sadly though, that was it for tonight's scary stories. A huge thank you for all the lovely Redditors who let me share their experiences with you on the channel. And a huge thank you to you for joining me again this evening. I will see you guys in the next one. For now though, all there is left for me to do is to wish you